Andrew, Bridgen, it's high time we had a catch-up. There has been a little bit happening in the world, just the occasional war and a couple of other things. In fact, a lot of people are feeling exhaustion. How are you feeling? How have you been in the last month or so?
I'm fine. I'm going to be speaking at the Unite the Kingdom rally on the 16th of May. And right. I can share with you other news that I'm in court with Matt Hancock on the 18th of May. That's going to be a busy week. Wow. His appeal, where it's the third time to try and strike out my applications against him. He always maintains that he's innocent and he'll win in court, but he never wants to go to final hearing. All he ever wants to do is try and stop the proceedings moving forward.
And just remind people who aren't familiar with that or have forgotten just a brief overview of that case. It's a really interesting one because not many other people are taking on those corrupt politicians from the pandemic.
Well, Hancock was the health secretary during the pandemic. He and Rishi Sunak, who was our prime minister, I didn't realise at the time that he owned 11%. He'd acquired 11% of Moderna. Through Thalim in the Cayman Islands, so he had a vested interest. They did a two-hander in Parliament after I stopped the government from vaccinating the under fives down to babies of 6 months in the UK by asking questions and pointing out the vaccines weren't safe and effective in 2022. They turned on me for a tweet where I said that the vaccine rollout is as a world-leading cardiologist told me. The vaccine rollout is the biggest crime against humanity since the Holocaust, and they fabricated that was anti-Semitic, rounded on me in the House of Commons in an organised way at PMQs, and unfortunately Hancock retweeted that defamatory statement
outside Parliament.
Outside of Parliament. He tried to say that he'd caused me no harm by his actions, which is a bit ludicrous. The court wouldn't have that. He's dropped that now, and now he's going for some sort of spurious appeal against another strikeout that he tried. And we'll hear on the 18th. I'm tremendously confident of my case. I'm not confident about the judges. Unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of jiggery-pokery in our judicial system at the moment. But the appeal court judges will have to, three of them, will have to basically rewrite defamation law and rewrite the Oxford English Dictionary. We'll see what they're at. That's to fine for Hancock. They'd have to do that. We will see what their appetite is to protect Matt Hancock. He's pretty much loathed in the UK, and it's getting worse by the day for him. So we'll see. We can only deal with what we have to deal with.
He's one of those men who's unfortunately extremely easy to loathe, even from this side of the globe. He's an extremely unlikable man. For me, it's having the crowds with you. So maybe on the 16th, you can say to the crowds, turn up to court, because why I won my legal appeal, Andrew, was because New Zealand was horrified that I was found guilty of assault for merely touching someone lightly on the arm and saying, excuse me. And so the judges then get more honest. It's interesting.
We're unfortunately in a position where you need to have public oversight of the case to ensure, shall we keep the judges on the straight and narrow there. We've requested a video link for that hearing, and I will be putting it out on social media as soon as we've got it. And I do hope that people around the globe around the world will ask for a link, and hopefully we'll see justice not only be done but seen to be done.
There are many legacies you already have in your arsenal, Andrew, but I think that's one of your great ones, the post office scandal exposing that. But I think stopping the under fives being jabbed may even have reverberated around the world, because that wasn't pushed in New Zealand. So just your pushback could have saved not only UK young children, but possibly other countries, at least in the Commonwealth. But we'll wait and see. Certainly that was something that was stopped here. It is depressing to see that nobody has been pulled up for the greatest crime in history. Who was that cardiologist who said that? And I agree with that.
No, I didn't name him, since it's subject to legal legal matter. I can name him after the case is over.
Yeah.
But I mean, that case has been 3 years. It's cost a lot of money because you can't drag Matt Hancock, the health secretary, kicking and screaming to court. He's never even put a witness statement in he's signed. They've already been signed by his lawyers. That's because he doesn't want to be cross-examined on anything. And you can only be cross-examined on your own sworn witness statement, not a statement put in by your legal team. I mean, it's so biased. They even made his barrister up to a judge on the bench of the King's Bench, sitting alongside the same judges who were sitting in judgment of our case during the hearing. That
is just the games they play. I mean, Barry Young here with the New Zealand data is the same. They spread out the case, and try to make it as protracted so that the public will forget about the case. And then I bumped into somebody who took Air New Zealand to court. A group of them took Air New Zealand to court because the pilots were mandated and all the airline staff. But how dangerous to have pilots who've been jabbed in our airlines flying, both of them flying, possibly with the chance of having a sudden, unexpected event. It's been a year that they've been waiting for the outcome of that completed trial. A year they've been waiting for the outcome. So the delays happen at both ends. We'll put
we've
that.
We've also got a very important inquest which I've been involved with for nearly 4 years with a family called the Dimmocks. Derek Dimmock was, we believe, killed with midazolam and morphine in, I think, 2020. That first hearing happened in March 25. Then we had a hearing in August, September, and then we had another hearing, further extension to the hearing in December 2025. It's supposed to be, the evidence is overwhelming, and world experts have given evidence, experts in palliative care like Professor Sam Ahmedze, the man who chaired the NICE committee that replaced the totally discredited Liverpool Care Pathway in 2014. He gave his expert witness, and his expert opinion was that Mr. Dimmock was killed with medications, NG163, midazolam and morphine. Now, because the evidence is so compelling, that case has ground to a halt. We've no idea now when the coroner's actually going to give his verdict, and that is putting Maureen Dimmock, the widow, and her son Paul. I mean, it's nearly been 6 years now. It has been 6 years now since he died, coming up to, and they can't get any closure. And there's no appetite to get on because the conclusions that the coroner would have to come to are unpalatable for the establishment.
And the legacy media is not doing its job in any way. In a proper world, the legacy media would be pushing the government. In a proper world, Andrew, the executive arm and the judicial arm of government would be completely separated, and they haven't been. That just for people who aren't quite aware of the import of that, what were the Liverpool protocols and why is it so important that we're aware what happened with midazolam and how they tried to rort the numbers of COVID?
Well, what we voted in 2014 to get rid of was the Liverpool Care Pathway, an end-of-life pathway, which it was deemed that it was inhuman, and also that people had been put on it, and it was, once you're on it, that was it, as a death sentence, who weren't necessarily at end of life. But I mean, if you give nil by mouth, no food and water, people die without giving them sedatives. And so they were given sedatives and given no food, no water. Well, that's a death sentence. And unsurprisingly, everyone died. Well, Matt Hancock, the health secretary I've tried to get into court repeatedly, he approved a new pathway, a new nice guideline on, I think it was the 3rd or 4th of April 2020 in response to COVID, and it was called NICE Guideline 163, and it involved prescribing midazolam and morphine for vulnerable elderly suspected of having COVID-19 who weren't fit enough to go on a ventilator. And that's a death sentence because midazolam and morphine is a respiratory suppressant and you just stop breathing.
I think midazolam's used.
Nobody who was put on that protocol survived. Everyone died. And
shocking.
that's superseded by NICE Guideline 191 to replace 163 after a couple of years, so around 2022. And every NICE guideline is available. You can inspect them on the NHS website and NHS England's website. But there's one missing, and it's NG163, which is deleted. It's almost as if they're ashamed of it, and they should be. I think it was the mass euthanization of hundreds of thousands of people in the UK.
Matt Hancock, you must have absolutely no humanity in you. How does he sleep at night, Andrew? How does he sleep?
I don't know. I would doubt he's going out in public an awful lot, and it's going to get worse for him. So, and this week I uncovered some data which had basically been released in September last year by our Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency, the MHRA, which is probably the UK equivalent of the FDA. And obviously, we've got the yellow card system in the UK, which is basically a passive system where doctors are supposed to write in with cases they think may be linked to vaccine harms or any medical harm. But it's a passive system. And the Medicines and Healthcare
by passive, you mean people have to report themselves. It's not automatically going to the system.
And we know that it's massive underreporting.
Yes, there is.
By both patients and doctors. So the MHRA in the UK in 2020 decided to recruit 36,000 people. It's a large survey, and monitor them actively. So ring them up and ask them. And they followed them for a couple of years through the pandemic, and 30,000 of them approximately took COVID vaccines, and then they've hidden that data for 4 years, and it's been got out of them in bits, and they still won't release the actual raw data. But the headlines are that 51% of those who took the vaccines in that 30,000 group. Oh, and by the way, they managed to recruit about 2,450 pregnant women or women who were breastfeeding into the trial. And 51% of all those who took the COVID vaccines in 2021 reported an adverse event from it, which could be as little as sore arm or headache. But the shocking figure is that 13.7%, that is 1 in 7, reported a severe adverse event. And a severe adverse event is defined as death, which is pretty severe, hospitalisation, disability, or damage to a newborn baby. 1 in 7. And they'd had that data for years. They've tried to push it off as saying, well, there was no control. They didn't really follow the people who didn't take the vaccines. And they're trying to say that this whole survey they did was actually just to try and find the discrepancy between the active monitoring and passive monitoring, i.e. what it's going to show you is that the yellow card system is completely underreported the vaccine harms, and they tried to bury it. How they could have data under their control, which they collected, it was their data, and still allow the vaccines to be pushed out booster after booster. And then we've got a spring campaign in the UK now for the COVID-19 vaccines again, which must be about the 12th or 13th shot now, over 75s and the immunocompromised and vulnerable. I mean, these are the last people should be taking those toxic jabs. They're not giving up and they're not giving ground. And no one's talking about this in Parliament. And the disappointing thing for me is that obviously when I stood up in 2022, 2023 and 2024 raising concerns about these dangerous and ineffective so-called vaccines, which are actually gene therapies, they knew. and they went for me for telling the truth, and they were doing immense harm to the people in the UK, and we could have brought the truth out, and it would have saved a lot of lives around the world. And they're sticking with their lies. They're completely committed. Our Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency, 86% funding comes from Big Pharma itself. They're bought and paid for. We do have another committee called the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation who advise the government. But between the members of that committee, they declared £1 billion of investments in Big Pharma. So they're pretty compromised as well. And what's clear to me is that every institution that was there to protect the public interest throughout the pandemic completely failed, including our Parliament.
I mean, we need a pause to take it all in. It's horrendous. It's
1 in
horrendous.
7.
And what was the punishment?
And how many shots do they want you to take? What, you should be on your 12th or 13th now?
It's infinite.
I mean, it's Russia. It's absolute Russian roulette every time.
We're just going into
winter.
And
we've just heard today. Also, that doesn't really take into account that yellow card reporting, the increased risk of cancer from the contamination in the mRNA vaccines, the DNA contamination, and the fact that in the Pfizer jabs they actually put the SV40 promoter region, didn't declare it to the regulator, and that's been linked to cancer for decades. In fact, they use that on lab rats to induce cancer so they can study it. They give them SV40. That was and they didn't pull the jabs even after that was uncovered. Well, what we've got now today announced in the UK is that we've got the highest rate of cancer diagnosis we've ever had in the UK, and that someone's being diagnosed for the first time with cancer every 80 seconds.
Andrew.
And that's exactly what I stood up in 2023 and 2024 in the House of Commons and said, this is the time bomb that we've got to look forward to now, would be a massive increase in cancer. But nobody wanted to listen then. To be honest, Liz, they don't want to listen now either.
I mean, it's even after all these years of doing this work, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming that there are these lies out there. We put out an interview with Barry Duffield, who was an actor in Spartacus, who has been seriously jab injured. And I had a message about it, 5 months on, from a woman who'd shown it to an 80-year-old. And she said, I've never heard anybody speaking like that Andrew Bridgen speaking. Can I send this to my grandchildren? Now, that feedback was so impactful as well, because these people are being still sold the lies from legacy media. Many have never heard the honesty with which you speak.
Well, I posted something on social media today from a former journalist for the Irish Times, and he's gone on the record and saying, he's disgusted that his old newspaper and his colleagues are part of a criminal organisation that has deliberately covered up the body count from the toxic COVID jabs. And of course, Ireland really got hammered. I think I've told you before that the most vaccinated place in the world is in Ireland. It's a place called Waterford. They had the highest vaccination rate in the world. Then they suffered the highest COVID rate in Ireland, and then they had the highest excess deaths. And they got an award. The local health authority got an award from the World Health Organization for the way they handled the pandemic. They had the highest death rate, having had the highest vaccination rate. 85% excess deaths at one stage they were on.
And it's all hidden by the legacy media. They
could solve it. The BBC could solve it in a day just by telling the truth.
By telling the truth. Michael Yon says, if you were not specifically told that these were bioweapon shots full of poison, if you were not given the warning, then you're not at their table and you will die. You will be killed off. So I say that to legacy media around the world. You're not going to be saved. The only thing you can do is they tell the truth.
I mean, I'm absolutely convinced, and I was told by members of the lobby in Parliament in 2022, 2023, 2024, that they'd taken them and had taken the boosters. So, the they're getting rid of them as well.
They're getting rid of them. And so when the legacy media starts telling the truth, in spite of their bosses, be sacked, just tell the truth and let that be a scandal on air. You will be remembered for something good. But I'll tell you, the former Prime Minister who succeeded Jacinda Ardern here, there's been unequivocal evidence that he knew that the young people in New Zealand, the sort of 14 to 13 to 19-year-olds, would be harmed by these jabs, Andrew, and he went ahead and ordered it. That scandal broke over his head, and it made legacy media. He is still standing in our November election as the leader of the opposition. He should have been kicked out and put on trial, and the legacy media has let that story drop.
Well,
he had
that's
criminal knowledge.
The same situation in the UK. Young people were vaccinated, supposedly, but I mean, we now know that the vaccines were never even tested to see if they stopped transmission or contraction of the infection. So they were told they'd got to have it to protect others. Well, that was never going to work anyway. But I mean, do we live in a sort of society where we expect young people who are at no risk, absolutely minuscule risk, many times more chance of being struck by lightning than dying of COVID-19, taking a dangerous and ineffective vaccine to protect older people? I mean, what society come to if we're expecting babies to be sacrificed to protect older people? That's not the way the world should work.
Absolutely.
I expect that we'd have to make sacrifices for children, not to hold the children in front of us.
And when you look at that, there is a much darker agenda. I mean, Michael always calls it a bioweapon because he says this is a weapon of mass destruction. This was a weapon that shot to reduce the world's population. And that is what it will do. What will it do to the fertility of those young people? What will happen to the ovaries of those young girls who want to have babies in the future? Or the sperm count of those young boys? It's showing that the jab really affects the sperm count.
We know it affects young men severely with myocarditis, and don't believe anything you see in the mainstream media about, it's mild myocarditis. There is no mild myocarditis. The heart does not regenerate and recover. Any scarring and damaged tissue in the heart, you've got it for the rest of your life. It's a time bomb ticking, and it can never be repaired. Heart damage is only ever cumulative.
Can you imagine the torture in New Zealand where we see, you talk about awards, Jacinda Ardern is now up for an Emmy for her pathetic documentary, lauding herself, largely shot by her own husband. And that's up for a couple of Emmy Awards. She's touting her book everywhere about her compassion and her kindness, and New Zealanders are still lining up to see her. It is so sad. It's so sad. They're going to die believing she was a heroine who saved them. Because she came from a marketing background. That was the one thing she was good at, Andrew. It's gaslighting.
A lot of our media in the UK now is actually making programs for themselves. The trust in the mainstream media has dropped off a cliff since COVID-19.
I can't even look at the BBC. I think they're disgraceful. So then we look at that. We look at the fact that there is a group of individuals who are willing to see a large proportion of the world's population die off. And then we start to tie in the war. What do you make of this war? What do you make of Trump unneedled by Iran? There was no need for him to go to war with Iran.
Well, we've been weeks away from Iran having a nuclear bomb for decades now, haven't we? It's been used as an excuse. The elites need a major crisis. They're losing control. They need to reinforce their power over us once again. They've decided they want an energy crisis. They want energy lockdowns. They've been wanting those since the COVID lockdowns, quite honestly. They've been talking about them. And they're going to create it. So we've got a war that's closed off the Straits of Hormuz. And that shouldn't really be affecting the UK at all. None of our oil comes through there. We have our oil from the North Sea, and our imports come from Norway. It has affected the price. But what we've also seen is, mysteriously, a spate of explosions, fires, at energy infrastructure, oil and gas around the world, from Texas to Iraq.
Geelong in Australia.
In Australia, one of your two. You're lucky. I think we've only got one oil refinery left now in the UK.
Ardern took down the last one here in New Zealand, Marsden Point, but in Australia they had two left.
And now we know why the Nord Stream pipeline was destroyed. We know why the EU allowed Ukraine to destroy the pipeline from Russia to Hungary a few months ago, which also destabilised before the elections in Hungary as well, where the incumbent Viktor Orban, who was a pain in the side to the European Union and defending the rights of Hungarian people, he's now been removed, so they've won on that one. We've got net zero nonsense in the UK, so we've sealed over oil fields in the North Sea, which were productive, that we could have got a lot more oil and gas out of. I was in the Netherlands only a couple of weeks ago. They've got the biggest gas field in Europe just off their coast. Mysteriously, those wells were concreted over last year as well.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So
the whole of Europe has made itself able to be held to ransom in the event. And it's hard to believe, though. Those are not coincidences. It's all planned. And the big knock-on effect is we're probably within weeks, unless the straits open, and there's no sign of that, with Trump saying this war could go on for 6 months now and the straits are staying closed, that within weeks we will have energy shortages in the UK, which will lead to what they call energy lockdowns. And if we're not careful, I think it's going to be a very long time before we're going to get out of that. And there was never any need for it. When I was a young man, when I was a child, where I live is a coal mining area. We've got ample coal. We had coal-fired power stations. We had energy security on very, very short distances to move that coal to the power stations. You're talking about tens of miles. Then we had the North Sea oil and gas, and we were self-sufficient on that. That's now been destroyed by net zero. We deliberately put ourselves in a situation where we do not have energy security. And despite everything that's going on, there's no relaxation from this crazy Labour government we've got, who are mired in sleaze and corruption and everything else, that they're still not putting new licenses out to drill for oil and gas in the North Sea, where we've got the infrastructure to extract our own oil and gas. But of course, in the madness of net zero accounting, if we buy our oil and gas from Norway, it counts on their carbon footprint, not ours, even if we're burning it, apparently. So that's all right then.
The whole net zero thing needs to go. Has anybody looked at what happens to the windmills when to the wind turbine blades when they have reached the end of their life? There is no way of recycling them, so they lie in the ground, causing enormous pollution.
I think the figures were by 2050 there'll be over 40 million of those huge turbine blades having to be buried in the ground.
Let alone the damage they do to birds. Huge damage.
Most of them will never ever recover the carbon it costs to put them in their lifetime before they're worn out. And it's interesting, Liz, because I've met a few interesting characters over the years, and over the last few years I've met some of the engineers who decommissioned the coal-fired power stations, which are all along the River Trent, which is on the border of northwest Leicestershire. The Derbyshire-Leicestershire border is the River Trent. And there were a lot of power stations along there, and they've all been decommissioned. And I spoke to some of the engineers, and they said they didn't scrap them. They were taken apart, put into boxes and sent to China. And within weeks, they would have been producing coal-fired. So there was never any saving to the environment, because instead of producing cheap, reliable coal-fired energy in the UK, they were producing it in China, probably within months. They're probably still producing it now. They're probably producing the cheap, reliable energy that is powering the factories to make the solar panels and the wind turbines so that we can have very expensive, unreliable energy. And I think the Chinese are probably laughing at us.
Oh, that is shocking. That is so cynical because it shows such a lack of sincerity. So again, net zero is all about control.
We've all been engineered into this position where we have no energy security, and we're now on the winds of fate of the marketplace. So we're having oil and gas infrastructure in the Middle East and further afield. Pakistan have had a huge explosion with their oil and gas, and there's almost one or two every day. It's hard to see that there isn't some very powerful force which is going to ensure that whatever happens, we're going to be in an energy lockdown. And the knock-on from that is we're going to go into food shortages.
Food shortages, the farmers won't get the fertiliser, although I think locally we can start looking at options to make our own fertilisers. But the other one is, imagine food shortages like the Chinese communist system in Russia, where you had to have certain tokens to go and get your loaf of bread. That totally plays in, Andrew, to the CBDC.
That's how Stalin put his control over the Ukrainians. He starved them out. He even took their seed, didn't leave them enough seed to grow the next year's crop, and 20 million people died. There's half the world that the globalists can't. Or as I call them now, the useless eliters. They can't control half the world because they don't have the internet, so they can't have the surveillance state. But unfortunately, that's the poor half of the world, and without fertiliser, they're not going to be able to afford to buy food in, and they're going to suffer. And I've been saying for years over here, as our farmers are being attacked and we're reducing the amount of food we're producing in the UK, that every field we don't grow food on in the UK, when it comes to the crunch, all we're doing is starving somebody in the third world. Because that's what we're actually doing. It's about the global amount of food that's available. And, wealthy countries might be able to import whatever's about. Poor countries don't have that option. And, of course, then we could see another mass migration of people into what they think is the land of milk and honey.
I want to get to migration with you, but just before I do, yes, I was reading that without fertilisers, potentially a world that can support, say, with fertilisers, 8 billion people, the world without fertilisers would really not be able to support much more than 2 billion people. So I think
fertilisers in Africa have probably increased food production by 100%. Well, I mean, if they halved without fertiliser, if it's half what they normally have. I mean, this is serious trouble. You're talking, continental famine, and of course, are we going to have a lot of food to send them? We're not, are we? The UK is importing over half of its food now, and we may have noticed we seem to have more mouths to feed every day.
You're going into spring and summer, so what do you advise Brits to do? I mean, I would say to anybody who's got the slightest balcony, get pots and start to plant what you can. Get bags. You can put in lots of potatoes, and here we call them kumara, sweet potatoes. You can grow a lot in summer. Pumpkin as well. They're
not actually in the ground that long to. We don't need them in the ground that long to get a crop. We're heading into uncharted territory.
What can people do to help themselves and not just be in panic and fear, Andrew? What if you were tomorrow the Prime Minister of the UK? Pray God, you and Rupert Lowe. What would you advise the people to turn this around for their own families? How can they help themselves?
We need to just keep urging our politicians to drop the net zero nonsense. But I mean, they just can't. That's a question above their pay grade. That's policies set for them. And of course, our politics over here at the moment is completely paralysed over the Peter Mandelson affair. And
we better look at that. We better look at that.
Keir Starmer's going to prorogue Parliament on Tuesday, which means he won't have to face the Prime Minister's questions for a month. It's very clever the way he's done it.
That's what Trudeau did. That's what Trudeau did.
Yeah. He's going to do that because he's on the ropes. But I think his own party are now openly calling for him to resign. And of course, the hearings in the UK on Monday start over the Ukrainian rent boys who carried out an arson attack on his property. I mean, that's over a year ago. That's finally getting to court. And as I've put on social media, if mainstream media are all over that on Monday and report it honestly and fairly, that means that Starmer's puppet masters are cutting his strings. If they don't, it means that they're still protecting him. What a sad indictment of the free press in the UK.
Rupert Murdoch, Lachlan Murdoch, you better tell the truth. And rent boys doesn't mean anything to do with rent. It means prostitutes, male prostitutes, who were attacking Starmer's house. Just briefly, that story.
Well, how did they know? I managed to do 14 years, longer than Starmer's not been that in Parliament as long as I was at the moment. I managed to do 40 years. I didn't have any rent boys attacking any of my property, and he's had 3.
How did they know his address?
Had they been there? One can only presume.
And the Mandelson affair, for people that over on this side of the world who
Peter Mandelson is a colourful character, an open homosexual. Is
that a prerequisite for the British Parliament now?
But I think, in my experience, I think they've probably got the majority at least. I had 2 lists. I had the homosexuals and the heterosexuals, and I kept moving people every year onto the homosexual list. I never moved anyone back, Liz.
And that's no judgment. It simply means that it may allow more compromat on some people, because if you're not openly declaring what your sexual proclivities are, you're able to be compromised.
Blackmailed.
Yes.
Well, Mandelson, he was there under Tony Blair. He was one of Tony Blair's lieutenants. He's resigned. This is the 3rd time he's had to be sacked from government, effectively. The first time was the Hinduja case, as I recall. That was over cash for passports. And he was introduced to, the Hindujas were introduced to Peter Mandelson by one of my old sparring partners, who it took me 9 years to get him out of Parliament, another homosexual Labour MP called Keith Vaz from Leicester down the road. He introduced the Hindujas to Peter Mandelson, and over the cash for passports issue, he had to go the first time. That again, if people think that Starmer chose Mandelson, that's above our Prime Minister's pay grade. That would have been decided by someone else higher than that. If you think that, you don't know how the puppet show works in our Parliament. Just the same as Nigel Farage, it wasn't his decision to take in the vaccine minister, who is loathed, absolutely toxic during the pandemic, Nadeem Zahawi. Take him in to reform his political party. For me, that just showed you that Nigel Farage is many things. He's not stupid. He knew that Zahawi was toxic, and he would have only taken him in because he was told to take him in. That shows that Nigel Farage isn't running a reform. He's not in charge. He's in the puppet show as well.
That's a betrayal. Who are the Hindujas? Just let's get back to Mandelson.
They were Pakistani international businessmen.
Right.
And they wanted some passports, and they wanted them quick.
Interesting.
And I believe that money had changed hands.
That's very relevant. I'm going to come back to that. And what was the second scandal in which Mandelson?
I can't remember what the second scandal was.
Yes. But there was one.
But it'll all be minuted. But I mean, obviously, it's the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And I'm told from the insiders that, why would they want Mandelson, with a high-risk candidate who apparently never passed vetting but was still approved for the highest level of security clearance? We now know that he when he was in the cabinet, he was passing confidential economic information to Jeffrey Epstein, which would be of enormous financial interest to Epstein and anybody else that Epstein decided to share that information with in the useless elites. They would, for anybody to make a lot of money, all you need is prior knowledge of events, and it's insider trading, isn't it? If you know that we're going to selling gilts or buying gilts on a mass, or selling all our gold reserves, if you know it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, you can play the markets, and it's not a gamble, it's a dead certainty. You can't really lose because you know exactly what's going to happen in advance, because a cabinet minister has told you confidential information, and he should never have done that. That's what they're investigating him for, let alone the fact that there's photographs of him wearing his underpants talking to young people on Epstein's Island, Lord Mandelson. It's really, and I think this is going to bring Starmer down. But we've also got local elections here, not in northwest Leicestershire, but around on the I think it's the 7th of May. So they'll probably hang on to Starmer because the Labour Party are going to be obliterated. I think Wales has got a lot of elections, and London, and there is actually some talk that they may have control of no councils.
Oh, that would be marvellous. But who does get
and
control?
Those are strong. London and Wales are two Labour strongholds. But I think most Labour MPs already accepted after not even 2 years in government that they're all going to be out at the next election, and you can see them hanging on. And if Starmer goes, I mean, it'll be another World Economic Forum Agenda 2030 approved candidate.
Yes, that's the problem.
So all you're doing is replacing the human shield for deeply unpopular policies. And they've still got a massive majority, even though they've got no support in the country. So what the damage they've done in less than 2 years is immense. I mean, I just don't think the UK, we can't stand 3 more years of this. If you had to bet when the next general election would be, you'd say it would be May 29, which is still 3 years away. The damage that would be done would be absolutely horrific, and I'm not sure we're going to vote our way out of this, because at the moment, unless we can get Restore and Rupert Lowe moving, which it's going brilliant, they're at 9% in the polls, Restore, already after sort of 8 weeks as a party.
That's good.
But there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm not unconvinced, since the Uni-Party is Rupert's getting no positive coverage on the mainstream media, as you can expect. He's public enemy number one. The establishment are attacking him on every turn and calling him an extremist. It's going to be an uphill struggle. And the control over the Uni-Party is such that I wouldn't even put it past them that, if they rang up and told Starmer, you've got to call a general election because this Restore Party are getting too popular, and we can't let them get established.
Yes.
Yeah, get the momentum. And you've got to hand the baton over to Nigel Farage in Reform. And he would have to, he's so compromised that he'd have to do it.
You wouldn't believe the similarities with New Zealand. So we've got the Uni-Party, we've got our Conservative Party is called National, and Labour. We've got a Labour as well, which is just execrable. And then we've got a third party that's looking heroic at the moment. But that was the leader of that party was the one I rang when we had the Barry Young data on day 3 of this current government and said, you can put this data out. You'll be on Tucker Carlson tomorrow. You'll be on Joe Rogan. You'll be a world hero. You can take all the credit for all the work we've done. You put this data out about the COVID jabs and how it's caused excess death in New Zealand. And this man who would pick up my phone calls no longer picked up my phone calls from that moment.
Too hot to handle.
And yet he's being hailed now in our upcoming election as the one who will save us. He won't save us. He's in the
Uni-Party want in anybody's country is they just want to have control of a party that gets a big majority, because then you can do anything you want.
That's
What they
it.
don't want is a parliament where you end up with a small majority and just a handful of principled MPs can hold the government to heel,
To account.
to account. So they're not bothered. I mean, they're not the globalists cabal. They're not bothered whether. I mean, what I think will happen in the UK if we have any more elections. If they get us into a big war, we won't be having any elections anyway. They'll go with the Civil Contingencies Act and they'll delay elections indefinitely, as they would have the right to do. So, but the Conservatives will, in the Uni-Party, they're in the Uni-Party. They're going to have an electoral pact with Reform. The Greens will have an electoral pact with Labour, and everyone will be against Restore. So it'll be the only real party to vote for is Restore, and as we know, also, from personal experience, I know that our elections are not free and fair in the UK. That's the last hurdle you have to get over, is that they're not above fixing elections in the UK to get their candidates in.
Andrew, can you start now preparing to get back in your electorate who love you? And I know from many interviews we've done, people stop you every day in the street and say, Andrew, I voted for you. Everyone I know voted for you. You should be in there. Could you start preparing now? And is there a way that you could say to people, if you're going to vote for me in the upcoming election, in 2 or 3 years, could you register with me that you intend to vote for me? I don't think that's vote rorting, so that you have an idea of numbers. So when you go into the election,
we can do all the canvassing, but I don't know what system, whether it's Nation Builder or whatever system that Restore Britain have got yet. I need to get involved in that. I'm hopefully going to be speaking to Rupert on the phone, Rupert Lowe, who's the leader of the party, at the weekend, and. Yeah, I'd love to stand for Restore at the next election in North West Leicestershire. That would be
wonderful.
Would be fantastic. And in fact, I've run campaigns on Brexit and no to the alternative vote. I've run 2 referendums where I ran the Midlands and I've ran the East Midlands. So my plan would be to secure the base in North West Leicestershire for a Restore win, and then concentrate on trying to get as many MPs as possible in the East Midlands in, and helping them.
That is wonderful news.
That is the strategy.
Yeah.
When we do, and one thing you haven't got any more of is time. So time is of the essence.
I mean, that's a huge vote of confidence, endorsement of Rupert Lowe. That tells me he must be a good man if you're endorsing him.
Well, I'm watching the establishment attack him, and they're attacking him exactly as they attacked me. So if they weren't, I'd be suspicious. But he's the only one they are attacking, and everyone's attacking him.
And do you know, when I stood in the last election, the legacy media made a point to never mention NZ Loyal, which was the party that I did. So they're doing the same. This is pattern recognition. We can see what they do. But that's absolutely wonderful. And if other people want to join you, can they contact you and say, I'd like to stand? So you start to get a really good team around you.
Well, they need to contact Restore Britain directly. Join the party. It's already got more members than the Conservative Party. It got more members in 4 weeks than the Conservative Party had got retained after 192 years.
Oh, that's just, I wish I was over there. I wish I could live there and help you with that campaign. My point as a lawyer was, could you get people who want to vote for you in North West Leicestershire to sign a more legal document, a kind of affidavit saying, I am hereby committing to voting for you, Andrew. And if after the election you are awarded only 3% again, I'm willing to put my affidavit forward to an inquiry. Now, I was thinking of doing this in the New Zealand election, but it was too close to the election. Someone said you might be had up for vote influencing.
But I know the area like the back of my hand, and I know every street. I know most of the letterboxes, the 40,000 letterboxes. So we will we'll get the canvass returns. We'll know where we stand, and I would have to put a letter before action to the returning officer in the local council and the elections department, pointing out that I know exactly what they did last time, and we're watching any repeat, any hint of a repeat of it, and we'll have to have lawyers over the whole thing. What a sad state of affairs! And of course, they got me last time because I didn't believe they'd ever do that, but they did.
Exactly.
They did it.
That's my point. We have to now, as well as accepting they want to depopulate the world, we have to accept that our elections they cheat their way in. Our elections are no longer honourable or honest. Is there a way you could have cameras everywhere? And for that, there are a couple of things.
They banned film cameras from my count at the last election, which is, again, that was very suspicious. As the returning officer said, we don't want anybody filming the count. I bet they didn't.
The other thing is, any multi-millionaire who wants to back Andrew, then you could have advertising on BBC who need the money, and you could absolutely infiltrate the BBC and the legacy media by paid ads. It's awful to pay those terrible people at the BBC.
We're not desperate enough to be on the BBC. Right.
That's a good line. So
we might be in trouble, but we're not that desperate.
I just want people to be aware, certainly in the UK, of what they've been doing to Rupert Lowe to try to slow him down. They put him on jury service, didn't they?
They put him on jury service for a fortnight, which is unheard of for an MP to have to do jury service. They've embroiled him in lots of parliamentary standards, exactly the same they did to me as soon as I spoke out against the vaccines. I hadn't had a problem with parliamentary standards for 12 years. As soon as I spoke about the COVID vaccines, I had 3 investigations back to back for the rest of my time in Parliament. They never. I think it was 2 weeks where I didn't. It was quite nice. And they smear you in the newspapers.
Oh yes. The name calling.
Yeah, it was interesting that former journalist of the Irish Times, because I found that the Times and the Sunday Times were the most vicious for attacking and smearing people who went against the narrative. They are absolutely in the pocket or in the control of the establishment. And as we came back to the MHRA data, they all knew that we were telling the truth about the vaccines, and they just couldn't let the truth come out. So it's not that the press didn't do their job, they actually worked against the truth coming out.
Are they Murdoch papers, both of those?
Yeah.
My ex-husband, when we lived in Australia, worked for Lachlan Murdoch, and he seemed quite a nice young chap when I met him. Lachlan, if you ever get to see this, please support the right side of history for your own children, for your own children's future, for a good world. Because what you're doing is amassing.
We're now in a fight. It's good against evil. There's no right and left anymore. No. It's about right and wrong, and we're currently. And I think we'll have to leave it at this point. We're in a situation across the world, in the so-called developed world, where people in positions of responsibility who do the right thing, tell the truth, try and protect the people and their interests, they're destroyed. And the people who have positions of power where they're lying and they're cheating, they're stealing, and they're harming the people they're supposed to be protecting, they're going to the top. And in what way, in any civilization, is that a sustainable situation? It's just not sustainable. Cannot carry on like this. And it's not just happening in the UK, it's happening around the world. In
lockstep. I'd like to do a follow-up interview with you and address migration, which we didn't get to this time because there's so much to cover, and I know you have something coming up. But it's wonderful to talk with you again, Andrew. I always love our catch-ups. So we'll catch up again soon, and that's wonderful, wonderful news about you going with Rupert Lowe. That will be the one to watch. That'll be the dark horse in the race.
Thank you for having me on, and God bless.
Thank you, Andrew.